So that we're recording, and welcome everybody to this webinar about So You Love an Addict. And I'm really delighted to be doing this with you today, Debbie. My name's Christian McNeil. I'm based in Glasgow. I'm a three principles practitioner. And Debi Mucillo, am I pronouncing that right?
That's fine. Yes, that's perfect.
Based in the States. We discovered that we both had a very personal interest in this subject. And just reflecting on it, I fell in love with a man who was an alcoholic more than 30 years ago, and it was that event that kind of changed the course of my life, that opened me up to the whole world of spiritual inquiry, and gradually led to my own recovery, which started a couple of years after I had met him. And eventually, sadly, the relationship with that man broke up. After there was a real turning point in my life, or a fork in the road, where by an extraordinary coincidence we both ended up at an AA meeting, neither of us looking for sobriety at that time, but a seed was planted in me, and if a seed was planted in him, it didn't take, and the relationship broke up soon after that, and he eventually drunk himself to death, in fact. So, it's quite I'm not one of those people who, I can be quite light about my own recovery and see the funny things that occur around addiction and recovery, but I'm also painfully aware of how devastating it can be. And although it's many, many years on, and I'm completely reconciled to all that, and I feel nothing but love for that man in my heart, and I have a sense that that goes two ways. I am also acutely aware of how painful it is to be living with someone who's caught up in the throes of addiction, and it was one of the most just discombobulating things I have ever experienced, not knowing what you were coming home to, not knowing what was going to happen next, and frequently very bizarre and difficult things happened. And just to bring it up to date, I got sober shortly after that, and I've been in recovery for almost 30 years. But recently, a family member has been just way out there and, writing really bizarre stuff to me on Facebook. And I'd love to be able to help him, but I don't think he's really actually ready for that. I think it's just the sort of, emotional incontinence that occurs when someone's inebriated. And I am just very conscious that all any of us can do is be there for someone. We can extend love, we can extend attention, we can give information and be willing to help, but ultimately you cannot get anybody else sober. And it doesn't matter what you know or how long you've known it, that ultimately one has to respect that other person's journey, and it is a personal, I don't know if it's a choice, but it's certainly it seems to me that there's a moment of grace, or maybe many moments of grace come along, but it's down to each of us whether we kind of accept that gift or not. That I now see recovery as a moment of a massive insight, a life-changing insight. But it's certainly not in my gift to give that to anybody else. So that's kind of my thumbnail experience of this topic, Debbie. And I'd love to hand it over to you and hear a bit more about your story, if that's all right.
Yeah. Hi, Christian. Thank you for having me. And it was just really, I was thinking about that this morning on how we came together. And there is this spirit that connects people when they're wanting to get something out, and they're needing, to serve something to get out there. And you were that person There's been several people in my life that, we just kind of knew it when we talked, that, I had a passion, that I want to help other people see what I've seen through the principles and how it's opened my eyes. And I went through a lot of struggle for a lot of years. And that struggle made me ill. I kind of would go maybe to bed a lot of times just because I didn't know how to handle it. And I reached out and went to Al-Anon, and that wasn't an answer for me. It is for a lot of people. It's a wonderful organization. There was just something that when I did understand and see these principles, that it opened me up to see the truth behind all of this. And it gave me a freedom that I was able to, get back my life. And I'm very happy now and excited to see, my own personal journey, but also my two boys. So backing up a moment, those that may know my story, I have two sons, and they've both been in and out of recovery. And it seems like they kind of took turns. So it was a roller coaster ride for me. And the same thing, I thought that I could help by fixing them or helping them with whatever. And once I did take a course with Michael Neal. I took a Super Coach Academy in 2014, and I started to see things. But then in my own life, it just opened up. I just kept seeing more and more. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't see addiction the same way that I did before, and that's what's really cool about it. I see it more as a habit. Maybe I use the word habit. And I don't look at them and their addiction the way that I used to. And they can feel that when they're around me, but I had to do a lot of work, Christian, with the principles through myself. So I had to open up a lot of things within me, and I didn't even, for a long time, when I even talk about my boys or that, I could, when I went through the coaching, went to do wellness coaching, then I went to I can help you with anxiety, depression, whatever you have. But when it came to addiction, I just kind of wanted to stay away from that because that was just way too close to my heart. So I've been able to open up and want to share with other people what I've seen that's been able to change my life and make a difference. And once I started seeing things within myself, and it was an inside job of not blaming myself and seeing the truth of who I really am, that was opened everything up as far as being able to have a relationship that was completely different with my sons. So as that happened, my son's recovery have become better and better. So, and less times, that they're in that, addictive behavior. So, but before we start, there's something, I'm just so thankful to Sid Banks and everything I've learned through him. And this morning, I opened up a page of the missing link, and I just wanted to read that because it really was just exactly in line of what we're talking about today. What I opened up is on page 91. It says, originally, psychology examined the connection between mind and soul until the theory was abandoned. When psychology stopped investigating the connection between mind and soul, they lost two of the most important clues to what they sought. They focused instead on behavior, which that is a big thing that I kind of focused on, leading us away from the true psychological nature, ultimately encouraging us to be passive victims of life. And I saw myself that way too, as and them also. So through this understanding, Christian, I've been able to see the truth of who they are and being able to let go of trying to fix them or change them and just love them for who they are. And it was more, it opened up a lot in them to see that the truth of who they are, and to love themselves and not see it so heavy, as addiction, so that's a little bit of my background. So
cool. Debbie, before you go on, I'm just wondering, we've got quite a small group. I'm just wondering if this would be a time just to invite anyone who's watching, just to say, share, if only if you wish, any interest that you have in the topic. What brought you here tonight?
That'd be great.
Or not? Oh, Julie, good.
You can always count on me to speak. I have two angles on this. I mean, one was very much I had a family member who would get drunk just because it was a great way. It was like a strategy. It was a great way of attracting attention and getting everybody round them and focused on them and so on. So I don't know that it was ever about the feeling of drinking for them, although I can't ask them now because they're not alive anymore. But it was definitely, it was like a kind of, surely you realise that everybody would love you and gather around you whether you were sober or not sober. So you don't actually need to do this thing, but she felt the need to. Excuse me, the noise in the background. She felt the need to do all of that, and so that's kind of an interesting, behaviour or pattern, or and then something you said, Christian, right at the front, because I don't think my addiction is with alcohol. My addiction is probably with food, actually. I could do with being maybe 40 pounds lighter than I am, but I just enjoy. I'm addicted to food, so yeah, and it's not the same sort. It's not dealt with in the same sort of way as alcohol and drugs. So it's. I mean, I guess the answer is the same, and I haven't had the big insight that you've had, but that's where my personal interest lies. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that, Julia. Thank you.
And if I can say something about that, and that's why I go back to seeing addiction as more of a habit, not as such a heavy, the word addiction. And you're right. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's, and we're all in and out of addictions. For me, my biggest addiction where I can connect to and see is I used to smoke about 15 years ago. And, I'd go for that cigarette because that's what made me feel good. Or I thought that that's what made me feel good. And I had the same thing as what Christian had. It was just an aha moment of, I really am seeing that. I'm seeing my thinking about this, even though I didn't know the principles, something clicked, and I saw that this too is the same. This too is my thinking about this. And so it is all the same. It's the same whether, whether it's food, whether it's you have a child that is, acting out in a way of behavior of cutting themselves or pulling their hair out, whatever it is. It's how I see it is it's all the same. It's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And and I'm one of those people that has had a number of issues over my lifetime. I was a smoker at one point as well, and I had various things also going on with food. I was bulimic at one stage, and I think that came about because I was living with my boyfriend when I was at college, and he wasn't a drinker like me. He drank, but he wasn't certainly at that stage anything like me. And I had to kind of rein it in. And all of this was none of this I was consciously thinking about or planning, but what I noticed was that my eating began to get really out of control, and it was the most awful feeling, because I couldn't seem to stop. And I would at times I would even bite the back of my hands. I was so so caught up in this compulsion to eat and all the purging that goes with that. And it came back briefly after I got sober. But again, I had another insight there, which was that no matter what, I'm not going down that route again. I'm not going to, I don't care if I end up the size of a house, I'm not going down that route again. And since I discovered the principles, which was about 8 years ago, I've had further insights around food. I see that, like you, Debbie, I see all so-called addiction, that compulsive behaviour is based on misunderstandings. It's that thought which is not visible about creating insecurity and reaching out for something to medicate that insecurity. But of course, because it can't, a thing, any substance, drink, cigarettes, food, cannot actually change the insecurity. Only a fresh thought does that. It never really works, and then you're left with the regret and the shame and the out of control feeling, etc., etc. So I saw that very clearly about food too, when I got that no cake, no bar of chocolate had the power to create well-being. But just recently I heard, it's funny because you think, oh, I've reached the end of knowing about that, and then you hear something really huge. And I heard somebody talking about how much time can go on in someone's head about whatever the thing was, and for many women, including me, despite all the progress that I've made, including me, that there's the sense of judging yourself and looking at yourself, and just how much energy that takes up, and the the stress hormones that it kind of kick in, and I just thought, oh well, there's another insight. I've been doing that, and the moment I saw it, it sort of lessened. And
our consciousness is always rising. I saw what happened. I was sharing this with somebody the other day. Just when you think, I was thinking, oh, my son, my one son hasn't drank since August, and there was this old thing that would come in my mind, like, oh, well, is it going to happen anytime? You know what I mean? You almost have that feeling of that it's totally made up. Like, when is he going to fall again? Okay, but what I saw is he did a few weeks ago. And usually when he would go to drinking, he'd be off for quite a while. And next thing, he'd be in the hospital and that type of thing. But the differences I've seen now is, like, this time he did, because he had that in his mind that said, oh, you've been good since August, and you're okay, and you can have a drink. And then it turned into 2, but he caught it and he was done with it very quickly. So he also sees the principles and understands them, and he's seeing them deeper and deeper, that was just a thought that he really believed. And so what I'm saying is that you see this faster, sooner, the more that you're in it. And I personally, I don't have anything on anymore. It's kind of like, oh, he drank, but whatever, you know what I mean? And the more that I have that positive energy of there's nothing wrong with him, because he's going to jump back, he's going to, just like me, when I do something that is, a little off, I'm back on the balance of, okay, now I'm back here, whether it's what you said, I'm eating crappy for a few days, and then all of a sudden I'm back. I see that same thing now with him. And the more whole, and the more that I know that he's able to do the same thing I'm able to, the more that both of my boys have just, like, it's made all the difference in the world. Yeah.
You reminded me of there was a British TV series called Traffic, and it was made again in an American series, and the, in it, a government minister, a politician, senior politician, has a daughter who's an addict, and she, keeps stealing from him and trashing his place. And he goes to India on a state visit, and he has a kind of spiritual experience there. And he comes back, and she's been on the game. That's the only way she can raise the money. And there's this incredible, touching moment, where he just takes her in his arms and says to her, "I love you. I love you as you are. If you never stop using, I will love you." And it's so touching. It was so touching to me, because I think it's so true, and that's the bit, that unconditional love. There is something incredibly healing about that. At the very least, for the family member watching someone else behave in that way, but I think for both, and we can't, you can't love everybody, love anyone else into recovery, but I think that there is something helpful, something that makes it more likely, as it well, makes us more recovery proof. I think when one is coming from that place.
Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. And that's where that's where I came to, because I didn't see it that way. It wasn't unconditional. It was conditional.
Mm-hmm.
It was conditional as of, how I saw it. So the principles on understanding that there is no right or wrong, and there is, there's nothing for me to do, and loving them no matter what they're doing. And getting to that place it is a spiritual place. It's where you're connecting to the spirit that they have the same within them. And they can feel that when you're around them. They can feel that you're not judging them, and that you're truly there for them, no matter what they're doing, no matter if they slip or not. I'm the first person they, come back to when they have slipped. So
yeah, lovely. I see Julian has a question. Julian, do you just want to unmute yourself and come in?
Thank you. I think you guys have been saying something really important there, or it strikes me that it's about loving yourself, isn't it? For me, it feels like where I go astray, where I eat, where I do those things, it's because I'm not feeling good about me. It's something about my thinking, and something about me not being at peace with where I'm at in life right now that is making me reach for these things. And I know from my own personal experience that however much you love me, Debi, and if that wouldn't help me, that wouldn't, in that moment, it wouldn't do anything for. I'd appreciate the fact that you love me and you want to help, etc., etc., but it wouldn't stop me reaching for the cake.
Yeah.
And it's that. I think that's what's really on offer with these principles, is for an individual to know that it's okay. And I've, a bit like you, Christian, I've had this understanding since 2010, and there are still lots of times where I don't believe it. I don't, but it just doesn't feel like the end, that I just get lost in the misunderstanding again, and I can be lost in the misunderstanding for days, weeks, and then catch myself out, so, and then I'm okay again for a while. And I think that's the same kind of pattern that we all have. Unless I've missed the boat and everybody else is enlightened and I'm just a human being.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. And it was an inside job with me. I had to see it for myself. I had to forgive myself for whatever and not blame myself, and, just see everything that came. I didn't have to really, when they say you don't have to do anything, that's so true, because once I could be out gardening, doing anything, and the thought comes through my mind of, oh, and then it's over. I don't blame myself or another person for anything that happened in my life. So it changes relationships with everybody in your life. So yeah, that's absolutely true. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's for me a big leap forward, if you like, in terms of the principles was exactly what you said, Julian, but realizing that in any moment, in the face of anything, the potential to be in love, to be connected, to be aware of the love that each of us is, that I am, that potential exists. And I love what you said, that that we sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. I found that so soothing when I came into this, that we all go up and down, in and out, however you want to describe it, and there's nowhere to get to, because I thought, yes, I'm already there, having spent 20 years striving to be better, to be living in a state of serenity, to be sort of blissed out, and the great irony is that I accepted and embraced that from the first weekend, from the get-go. But now that I'm sort of 8 years down the road, I've had a quality of life that's indescribable in that time. Certainly not without its challenges, and certainly not without every emotion under the sun at times. But there's just been there's a fundamental groundedness, I think, that an awareness of where experience is coming from, who we really are, and this capacity for awareness or consciousness to grow and expand has given me. I'm noticing.
Yeah, and that's
Sorry,
that's
Debbie, go on.
beautiful, that it's that, even when we're not seeing it, like Julian said, I just know that I'm going to see it eventually. I don't know if it's a day or 2 days or when I'm going to see it, but I'm able to just kind of let go and feel whatever it is, and just kind of know that I'm going to see it again. It's not going anywhere. Because I remember when I first learned the principles, I was like, I don't want this feeling to go away. I don't want this to ever go away. And I realize now it doesn't go away. It's always there. If it's just for my thinking at the time, or how I'm handling certain situations. So really, on all relationships, with husbands, spouses, your children, it's all the same, and it's coming from you. And so many times it's hard for me to be like, no, that doesn't feel like it's coming from me. It definitely feels like it's coming from my husband or whatever. But in the background, I know that I'm not seeing this, but I know it's coming from me.
Yeah. I had an example a couple of years ago. My son was home. Julian's met my son. My son was home from university for Christmas, and he was in his final year, and he'd taken up gambling, and he was a maths student, and he had all that kind of, I can beat the system, and that kind of intellectual arrogance, really, and he was. And he wasn't like losing lots of money, but he was spending a lot of time on his systems and online gambling. And I got into a real panic about that. I had the whole money lenders and, bankruptcy, so losing everything, legs being broken and all of that sort of stuff, as a future, and there's a lot of tension, and although he wasn't losing a lot of money. He was certainly, his mood was terrible, and I was very judgmental about that. And I was just in a place of, I was convinced that I needed, in order to come back, despite everything I knew about the principles, in order to come back to equilibrium, I needed him to stop this. And then I kind of cottoned on to myself and remembered that, you know, I don't think any of this is about denial or pouring paint over a difficult situation. I'm not any more in love with online gambling now than I was then. But I thought, of course, that does not have what he does not have the power to create my feeling. I'm doing that, my expectations, my demands, and even if terrible things were to happen to him in the future, I would still love him, and a part of him would still be whole and complete and perfect and unbroken. And I somehow just came back to a place of peace about it. And I was able to talk to him much more from a much more loving place, just to say that this, you almost to explain my process. And I mentioned to him that I was doing this call tonight, and I think he still does it occasionally, but he's certainly not obsessed with it as he was, and I don't think it's a particular problem. But I said to him, I hope you don't mind, but if it comes up, I'd like to talk about that. And he was fine. So that openness is there. But the point I was really making was that even when he was kind of in the throes of it, I was able to come back to, as you put it, Julian, experiencing the love within first, and then being able to have a conversation with him from a place of love too. And whether that had any impact, I don't know, whether he had his own insight or whatever. But it in that particular situation, there was some shift in the outside as well. But that was sort of the last thing in the series, if you like.
You know, I remember, I still do it at times, feel, I know that I can say anything if I'm in the right place with that person, and it's not coming from anger, and it's where it's coming from. And I've seen that so much with the boys, where before I was afraid to this could set them off, for me to talk about, what I'm seeing, or, and now I know the difference of the feeling of when we're in a good place together. There's not anything that we can't talk about, or that I can, speak to them about, because they're going to connect to that and get it differently. Whereas before I was afraid to open my mouth about anything. So that's kind of a new thing for me in the last 6 months, is being able to not hold it in and not internalize it, but know that when the time is right, I will be able to talk about this. And that's exactly what you were saying, Kristen. And that's a really, really great thing, to not have to hold it, and know when we can connect that way.
Yeah, not walking around on eggshells.
Yeah.
Debbie, I'm noticing Catherine joined us since we invited anyone who wanted to come in. So Catherine, I don't know if you would like to say a few words about what drew you to this call, but there's no obligation.
Just because the two of you were having the conversation, and that, I think any conversation looking in this direction is just an opportunity to listen deeper and to see what comes up. And as I reflect on it, I see I don't really have anyone in my life who's actually, I would call, an active addict that I know of. But I see the tendency to think I know what someone else should do. And I'm seeing through that in my own life. With my own daughter, I have one daughter. I was a single parent, and she's been an incredible teacher. I've learned so much. She is not interested in a single thing that I'm interested in. We're so different. I'm a bit of a health nut. I eat very cleanly, really naturally. Since having a stroke 7 years ago, I was a yoga teacher. She could care less. She lived on an ashram with me. She did yoga once in her life. She eats incredibly, from my view, very unhealthy. She's very overweight. All of this stuff, and I just love her and adore her exactly how she is. And this took me a long time. And when we spend time together now, I'm just amazed by her. She's taught me so much about what it really means to love and to accept and to surrender to that, and to have the humility to know that I have no idea what she should experience on her path in this life, but that my job is to love her unconditionally. And the fact that we're so different has just been the catalyst for so much falling away. And the best thing for me as a parent is when she comes to stay with me, she tells me how wonderful that time is, how restorative it is for her, and how it brings peace into her life. I mean, what more could I want as a parent? So, I guess, she has never been one to drink or do drugs. I was blessed that way, but as a parent, there's always something that we think should be different, or that we want to try and control or change, and it just, so it's just a lesson in learning to love, no matter how I look at it. And what does that loving really mean? It means this deep acceptance, and it's it's humbling for me. Parenting is humbling. I had to give up my ideas of who and what she should be and what she should and shouldn't experience, and really deeply respect her as an individual and as a fellow human being who is on a path that honestly I knew nothing about in terms of what should or shouldn't be happening. So I just love the conversation of parenting. It's the thing that's taught me the most in my life. And this understanding of the 3 principles has just given me clarity in terms of my approach to parenting that I never had before, which has been really freeing and beautiful. So,
That's beautiful, Catherine. Hey, it's good to see you, Catherine.
Good to see you too, Deb. Great to hear you and to see you.
What you were saying, it's just so beautiful, and that's true. And I've noticed, like with all of my kids, I have 4. You're right. I mean, the girls are certain things with them, but I have a relationship now that I'm just so blessed because I can be with them no matter what. And 2 of them have boyfriends, and whatever they tell me, and they're really more close and open, and they gravitate to wanting to be around me. And I don't help them with any decision. I may, the coach in me may come out and ask them a couple of questions, but I don't tell them anything. And it's so freeing for me, to just like live my life and know that they're okay, and they really want to be around me now. I mean, my boys love to be around me. They gravitate. Like, I don't know what you said, but you just make me feel good. Or, like you said, and you're doing nothing. But
I think it's that lightheartedness, like knowing that she has everything she needs within. It's not on my shoulders to give it to her.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let me give you this so I can avoid the pain that I'll feel through you suffering, or whatever that craziness was before. It's like, wow, you're an amazing human being, and I love you, and it's such a privilege to be on this journey with you while you sort your stuff out. It's like, I know I don't have to I tried giving her my answer. She was having none of it early on, and that taught me so much.
Yeah.
When she was really little, she would say to me, "I'm aware, Mother. I'm aware." And finally I heard that. I heard it was like this Zen slap. She was young. I'm aware. mother. And I went, you're
I
right.
love that.
You are aware. I love you, and let me be here with you while you work through this. Oh, incredible.
Wow.
What a change. The whole relationship, the whole dynamic was one of respect and shared, just a lot of joy where there used to be a lot of conflict and strife.
Right.
So, it's like a miracle. Learning
It really
to
is.
really listen.
I really feel it's magical. You're in a magical space when you just let go of everything, all of the thinking, when you're with them.
Yeah, that's when the miracle of this deeper wisdom arising and it being in the feeling. I love when Sid Banks said that the feeling of love contains wisdom. The feeling of love is wisdom itself, the wisdom of divine mind. That deep feeling of unconditional love is not empty, mushy, clingy, cloyy love. This deep feeling of love contains within it wisdom and clarity. And when we're coming from that place with nothing on it, that's for me what gets felt. That there's this transmission of this love that isn't a weight. Like my mom used to say, everything was like, of course I'm worried about you. Everything was fear-based, everything's worry, and that's love. And I'm going, I'm learning as a parent myself that that's not necessary. Like for her, it's love, but love, unconditional love comes when I'm not in a fearful place as a parent. There's no weight on it, and they're not feeling the weight of my love. So,
and that's what, when you were speaking earlier, that's exactly what I was wanting to connect is saying that the fear is one of the things that when I feel it, of course, sometimes I feel it, like when my son drank, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then I felt it, but then I was like, okay, it's gone, and I don't hold on to that fear. I'm just able to let go of that and know that it's going to take care of itself. And I see that the same as anxiety. It's all the same. It's all the same. We're going to feel it. We're going to go through it, but
it's also it's like I've got my own. She's got her fears. I've got mine. Let me not put mine on her as well. I don't want her to carry the weight. Let me take responsibility for the fear in me and not project it onto her. So she's got her own fear, and now she's got mine to deal with too. It's like, no, that's not where I want to go as a parent, right? I don't want to have her to have to dig herself out of that.
Being open to our children being able to teach us, because honestly, I will say, my children, all 4 of them, have been my biggest teachers, and I am so blessed, that they picked me for their mother. And like you said, each one of them have taught me so much, and sometimes I'm like, duh, wow, yeah.
I've just been reflecting while you two were talking about I've always been devoted to my children since they were born. It was a big surprise to me when my daughter was born that you kind of fell in love with this baby. I didn't know that happened to most people, I believe, but like you, once I came to understand a bit about the principles, well, actually very quickly, I had that same sense of being unburdened. Of I felt I had to, be kind of on the lookout for anything that could, could trip them up, and this was very much the effortless bit. It was just suddenly clear to me that they had their own wisdom and resilience, which was far more effective than my kind of second-hand thing. But another thing that I found is exactly what you were describing, Catherine. I think that experiencing being in a place of deep love with them, and again, it was effortless. It was a sort of change that I've noticed, and I'm going. My son now lives in London. I'm going down there this weekend, and I'm just really looking forward to it, because we generally hang out in that space, just doing really ordinary things. And my daughter, who's had popped in here earlier, it's the same thing, that kind of joy and connection that I didn't have any complaints about how I felt about them before, but there's just a new depth and a new connection and a new richness that is quite an incredible gift. And I think the same that when I'm in that in terms of what you were saying earlier, Julian, about loving yourself, that how that shows up for me is just a kind of bubbling up of a feeling of, I love my life. God, I love my life. And it's not forcing myself to be grateful. It's not a gratitude list. It's a completely spontaneous thing that just comes up. And I'm not trying to be smug here, because there are days and actually parts of today where one of them where things things really don't go great, and I don't love every minute, and I'm not necessarily in a major tiz, but I'm certainly not that loving life thing isn't always there, but it's such an astonishing and sustaining thing when it just bubbles up. And again, just one of the kind of side benefits, I think, of understanding who we are and how we work and where our experience comes from.
I think of those as moments of grace that happen with a quieter mind. I like you, I don't have a specific gratitude practice, but I have moments where I feel like I drop into a state of grace where all I can see is what's beautiful, or I see the astonishing beauty that's all around me, and it's always been there, and it's in the most simple, ordinary things. My mind just is still or isn't full of concern and worry. And so I'm available to see the beauty that's already here. And that for me is like, has come as my understanding has deepened. And as a result of that, I experience more peace of mind or periods of time where my mind is quieter, and I'm just available for what's already here, for the brilliance of what's already present. And I think with going back to parenting too, I think because I'm not loving her, I'm not worrying about her and calling it love, which was so confusing to me as a child as I was growing up, because it felt heavy and it felt like I was trying to be controlled. And my mom called it love, but it was completely fear-based. Bless her heart. She did the best she could. I couldn't understand why this love felt so heavy and so bad, quite frankly. And I think my lightheartedness, which is genuine, I don't try to be, is something that my daughter now goes, wow, my partner's mother is constantly worrying and trying to tell him what to do and trying to tell us what to do. Like, wow, it feels really different when we're here, Mom. It is such a lighthearted thing. And that for me is just living in the clarity of this understanding. It doesn't make sense I'm not saying I don't, again, it's not like I never worry about her, but it's rare. Like I really trust, if this is within me, it's also within her, ever present. I don't have to try and manipulate that in any way. And in that lightheartedness, beautiful things tend to happen that are often very ordinary, but extraordinary things can come out of that in terms of our connection. So I think it's Bill Pettit, he says, if I'm not in a feeling of lightheartedness, I know I'm getting caught up in my thinking. And that for me has been such a simple, fundamental touchstone that's not, I just heard it, and then it had this ripple effect in my life where I stayed in that, where I would come back to that lighthearted feeling of trust more often. And as a parent, that's just totally transformed the time that we spend together and the nature of our relationship. I was just going to say, everything teaches us. I had a sister who died when she was 43 years old. I'm 55 now. And I was into alternative healing and into all sorts of alternative healing modalities that my sister had zero interest in. And every time I saw her, I wanted to try and talk her into trying to do this alternative healing. And she was doing the totally conventional chemotherapy, radiation thing. And the greatest gift she ever gave me is she finally told me one day that she wasn't enjoying the time we spent together because I was trying to tell her what to do, and it completely stressed her out. And I stopped, because what I wanted her to feel from me was love. And she died never having done any of the alternative things that I wanted her to do. And I learned so much respect for other people's paths, and that I have, I'm here to support and suggest if I'm asked, but what I want you to feel from me is love. And I don't care who that is, when we're together, I want you to feel that I love and accept you, and not that I'm trying to manipulate you in some way. It taught me so much, and it transferred over into parenting and just every aspect of my life. And I learned to love her right through until her death, being with her in a state of love. And she couldn't care less about any of the things that I suggested. And I realized I had this insight about, when I have cancer, then I have the right to deal with it in the way I think I should deal with it. And she never once asked me, for an opinion. And I just learned so much from that. And I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but it occurs to me that it taught me so much about respect and honoring another person's path and being present, even when they're doing the opposite of what you imagine should be done. And that really helped me with my parenting too. It really taught me so much about respecting other people's journey, and while still being really present, and while still loving and caring, but not trying to give what hasn't been asked for. It's just, for me as a parent, that's the hardest thing. Here, let me fix this for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Catherine. Thank you. Debi, there was something that I wanted just to come to touch on for a minute, because we are coming towards the end of our time. But you said something early on about, initially when you were working in this field, you kind of stayed away from the whole co-addiction thing. I'll just call it that for brevity. And I was kind of similar. I wasn't sort of secretive about the fact that I was in recovery, but I got the principles was something different, and I was still very in favor of AA. I have very good feelings about that. I'm not anti in any way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But recently, it's as though. I mean, suddenly I have stuff to do with addiction on every front. It's as though it has come up at this point in my life. And you seem to be saying something similar, that you feel called to share more about it. And I'd just love you to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, actually, I didn't want to open up to the addiction part because it was so painful. But everything kept drawing me, to talk about it. I'd meet somebody and they would tell me maybe something about their son, and I don't know how it is there, but here, it's just really bad in our schools, with our children, and it just seems like I'm meeting more and more people that to be able to share this with, that have children or know people that are going through recovery, or so I couldn't get away from it. So I think that when you're going down a path, and I wanted to go every direction but that, it's going to draw you back in. It's going to draw you and show you, life is going to show you what you have, what you've gone through, and what you can share with other people, so that maybe perhaps they won't have to struggle as long as you did to see this. So there is no getting away from it now, because that's what I know. And that's what I've lived and I've seen, and I know that I have a lot to offer other people, that they too can live this, like Catherine was saying. I'm not saying I have a great day every day, but my life now is amazing, and because it's amazing, I'm able to because helping other people, and through what I've been through and sharing that, there's nothing else I could share. There's nothing else I could share. I could go with this has substance that I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Where, like I said, I started with the wellness, a little bit like Catherine, a little bit of, I really wanted to see how, I totally see how we can connect back to our innate health no matter what. And I don't know, I think this isn't a time to really share that, but I have had a near-death experience, and I've seen in a different level our consciousness and who we really are. And this is what I'm supposed to be sharing. It's not about anything else. So that's just what I know for sure.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And I suppose the more secure each of us becomes in ourselves through understanding how the system works, understanding the principles, then the more comfortable we can be, the more present we can be with life as it unfolds, and the less need to kind of push the river in order to get everything sorted out the way we think it should be. And so just responding to that call, responding to what you're drawn to do. Yeah, lovely. We are just coming to the end of our time. I don't know if anyone has anyone at all, whether you've come in before or not, has a desire to share anything or ask anything. And seems like not. It seems like maybe we've reached that place, Debbie. We have talked about doing a further series on the topic in the new year, probably on Thursday evenings at this same time. Start for 3 weeks, starting on the 11th of January. So we'll develop that further. But if there is any interest, or if you know of anybody who's interested in the in the topic, I will post something in the 3 Principles Conversations group, as it's now called. And I know that equally, if you know of anybody who's looking for a more private or discreet conversation, I'm very happy for anyone to reach out for me, and I'm sure that's the same for you too, Debbie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So perhaps I can just hand it back to you, Debbie, just to close off this evening.
Yeah, I think we're closing in a good feeling, and I thank everybody who was on here. It's a beautiful share.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yes, indeed. So thank you, everybody who's come along. Thank you for everything that you've shared. It has indeed been lovely for me, and especially Debbie. Thank you for making the time, and it's just been a real pleasure to do this with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.